Hi, I'm Shannon Decker, and I am here from the Speedy Foundation, as well as the No Overdose Nevada County campaign, to share some information with you around harm reduction, specifically fentanyl education as we launch into summer vacation. We're going to talk very briefly about what opioids are. They are a substance, they're a very specific type of substance, and there is a synthetic opioid called fentanyl that we are going to talk about very specifically. Narcan as a first aid technique. Narcan is something that will reverse the effects of an opioid. We'll talk about the Good Samaritan law in California and then local resources and support. So, opioids, they're a class of drugs. There are some that are prescription and they are used very well in the healthcare system. And then there's others that are illicit drugs, um, drugs that are either prescriptions that we're using without the prescription, or they are like street drugs. Heroin would be an example. But an opioid, it will impact the nerve. It'll increase the perception of pleasure while it decreases the perception of pain. So, at a really low dose, it really just makes a person sleepy or slow. But at a high dose, it results in problems with breathing, a decrease of heart rate, which stops our breathing capacity. And this can be very problematic. The number one cause of death from an overdose of opioids is depressed breathing. Our breathing stops and then our heart stops. And so when we look at the death rate in the United States, it has become one of the leading causes of death for Americans 18 to 45. And looking at the death rate per 100,000, I want you guys to look at that dark blue line. This is from synthetic opioids, and it really starts to increase in the United States in about 2016. California has that same trend. In 2016, that's when synthetic opioids like fentanyl started to enter our illicit drug markets. So, what's the difference between fentanyl and heroin? Well, let's take a look at these opioid doses. In the medical field, morphine has been an opioid that's been around the longest. It's used in the healthcare system very well, but it's highly addictive. And so we compare other opioids against morphine. So for a person who's not using opioids, they don't have a tolerance that's built up. If they were to consume a pea size, not the entire pea pod, but one pea size amount of morphine, that could potentially be a lethal overdose. For heroin, heroin is 2 times as strong as morphine. So the amount of a sunflower seed without its shell could potentially put someone into overdose. With fentanyl is 100 times as strong as morphine. Again, it's about the size of one sesame seed. But typically, it's not one sesame seed that's whole. It's a sesame seed that's been ground up into a powder or a liquid. And so it's not something that we could necessarily see. We can't taste it. We can't smell it. The only way to know if fentanyl is in a substance is to test it with fentanyl testing strips. There's other opioids that are even stronger. Sufentanil is one that's used in veterinary medicine. Carfentanil is used in drug warfare. So fentanyl, again, it is a 50 to 100 times as strong as morphine. And what we're finding is that it's being mixed in with other substances to increase their strength. So cocaine, MDMA or Molly, ketamine, amphetamines, essentially anything that you could think of right now in the illicit drug market. So that's illegal drugs like heroin, and it's also prescription drugs like Adderall, Xanax, Percocet that are being sold in the dark market. Not the Adderall that you get from a US pharmacy, but the Adderall that you might get off of Snapchat or buying it from someone on a college campus. Those are not necessarily coming from a pharmacy. So if we look at those blue pills, those are oxycodones. And the one on the left is an authentic one that was bought in a pharmacy. The one on the right was one it's fake. It's made with fentanyl. It looks exactly the same. You can't taste or smell a difference, but we know that it's artificial because it was tested for fentanyl. And so this is something that's made with a pill press and die cuts that look exactly like the authentic. And it just has whatever filler the manufacturer of this artificial drug is making. And so there's another example of some artificial pills that look real, but they actually have fentanyl in them. And then again, there is a dose of heroin that could put a person without a tolerance into overdose. And then on the other side, that same fentanyl, that amount could put someone into overdose. And when we're talking about fentanyl, we use this metaphor of a chocolate chip cookie. A chocolate chip cookie does not have those chocolate chips evenly dispersed. And when we're thinking about fentanyl, the powder might not be evenly dispersed, or the pill might not be evenly dispersed. So if it's a powder, let's say like cocaine that's been laced with fentanyl, the fentanyl might settle to the bottom because it's more dense than the cocaine. In a pill, there could be the chunks of the fentanyl, like that sunflower seed that's been ground up, but not necessarily to code. It's not like there's any regulations where people are manufacturing it, making sure that everything's done well. So we have to test everything. If we didn't buy it from a pharmacy, we need to test it to make sure there's no fentanyl in it. And we can test any substance that can be liquefied. And the good news is that we can liquefy pretty much anything. We're going to talk about fentanyl testing strips in just a minute, but let's talk about what it looks like if somebody does start to overdose on an opioid. So, your job is not to be a detective. Time is really critical. We need to get that person breathing again. We're looking for somebody who's not responding to stimulus. They're not responding to touch or to sound. You're yelling their name, you're shouting, you're shaking them. Maybe you're doing a sternal rub where you make a fist and you put it on their sternum and you rub vigorously. That should get them to respond. They might have pinpoint pupils, and that's not a sign that they're necessarily overdosing, but it is a sign that they're using opioids. They might have blue or gray fingernails or lips, and that's because the blood has stopped flowing. And those irregular breaths, that shallow breathing, gurgling sounds, or not breathing at all. Sometimes that gurgling sound is called a death rattle because your body is desperately trying to breathe. But the opioids have settled on your opioid receptors in your brain, which looks like this. Those opioids settle. And so the way that we can reverse an opioid overdose is to use Narcan and get that person connected to healthcare, 911, getting an ambulance. So what we can do as civilians is if we suspect that someone is overdosing, we can't get them to respond, we can use Narcan and it will not hurt someone that isn't necessarily overdosing on opioids. What it does is it is an opioid antagonist nasal spray, which will reverse an opioid overdose. It attaches to the opioid receptors in the brain to block the effects. Anyone of any age can carry and use it, and you can't get in trouble for using it. It also isn't going to get you high. All it's going to do is wipe those opioid receptors. So, if we are concerned that someone is overdosing, what we want to do is if you're with someone else, have them call 911 so you could administer Narcan. Or if you're alone, go ahead and give the Narcan and then call 911. Remember, you can put 911 on speakerphone so that they can be talking you through. And you want to tell that person, hey friend, I'm going to give you Narcan. It also helps anybody else in the room know what's going on. So the way that you'll do this is you will take your Narcan kit. The box comes with 2 Narcan doses. You want to peel back the foil. You want to tilt that person's head back. They should be on their back if it's at all possible. And then you insert the plunger into their nose. You push the whole thing in, administer the full plunger. You don't have to prime it or anything. And that gives them 4 milligrams of Narcan. We want to give them rescue breaths on their back. We give 1 breath every 5 seconds. So if they start breathing, that's great. But if they don't start breathing, we can give them rescue breaths, and 911 can help talk you through it. If they're not responsive after 2 to 3 minutes, go ahead and give the second dose that comes in the box in the alternate nostril. And again, you need to call 911. You need to have them on their way. We need medical response as well as Narcan. And so if that person starts to breathe on their own, you can put them into the recovery position. That's where we tuck one hand under their chin, we roll them to their side, and we can use one of their legs to prop them like a kickstand. Now, as they start to come to, they might be really confused. They've been in this really euphoric state, and bringing them back with Narcan is kind of like getting hit by a semi truck and like waking up from that. So they might be angry or shaking. They could be nauseous or sick, like physically sick. But you have called the police, you've got a paramedic response on the way, that can be scary. You can reassure them. You can say, you're safe. I'm here with you. Help is on the way. So, fentanyl testing strips, we can definitely always share more information with you, but what the high level need to know is that there are strips. They look like these blue ones up there, and you can test any substance that's been converted to liquid. Once you use the instructions that come with the tests and you test the substance, 2 lines means that there's no fentanyl, and 1 line means that there is fentanyl detected. So if there's fentanyl present, that gives us a chance to rethink and not take that substance. So again, 1 line means it's positive for fentanyl, don't take it. 2 lines means, let's think about that chocolate chip cookie effect. Is it still something that we want to do? Do I have Narcan on hand? Do I have a buddy? And I want to make sure that there's a designated person to call it just in case this substance does have an opioid that puts me into an overdose. These are just, safety features for people who do engage in substance use. And so if a person is going to be engaging in substances, they might be going to parties. And so there's some things to think about with safer partying. Buddy systems are big. Bringing a friend when you go to a party, keeping track of them, making sure they don't leave, and not leaving without them. Checking on them if they've been gone for a while. And making sure that when you go to a party that you have that buddy who is accountable for you too. You want to have a plan. So when you're going to a remote area, tell an adult or someone that you trust where you're going and when you should be home. We want to make sure that you have cell service and that your cell is charged. You can usually still call 911 even if you don't have cell service. So the next piece that is really important is Narcan. This is new, really, in our society. It's not something like when your parents were your age or even your older siblings or your cousins, your teachers, your coaches, when they were your age, this wasn't necessarily something that we had to worry about. Again, fentanyl entering our illicit drug market happened in 2016, and it's really just taking a strong hold in our community right now. And so, a safer partying technique is to have Narcan on hand, to know how to use it, and have a designated person at a party who carries it. Again, you don't have to participate in any substance use. This is your choice. It is a really good idea to not engage in substance use unless you know exactly what it is, you feel really safe, and that it's something that you want to do. Thinking about your developing brain is also really important. And so that is a conversation for another day, but we know that people are curious and we want you to know what the risks are. We also want you to know that if you do engage in experimental substance use, that you are protected by the Good Samaritan law. You can call 911 for an overdose or suspected overdose. It doesn't have to be opioids. And even if there's personal amounts of drugs or drug paraphernalia, you can't be arrested or charged. So if you've been engaging in substance use and you're underage or it was an illegal drug, they're not going to get you in trouble for that. They would just want to keep people safe. So this law was created to keep people safe. This does not apply if somebody's on probation or if there's other illegal things that are happening. Now, if you need to make a report on something, you are able to call David McKay, the school resource officer. There's his contact information. There's the non-emergency lines for Truckee, Placer County, and Nevada County, as well as the emergency line. 911 is always available. And the last piece for us to chat about are local resources. So in Truckee, Tahoe, the resources are available. You can scan that code, or you can visit nooverdosенc.com and go to the local resources. Tahoe Forest has Narcan and testing strips. You go to the emergency department, you walk up to the front window, and you just say, hey, I'd like to pick up some Narcan. It's free. The Speedy Foundation is me. I'm able to get you connected. And Gateway Mountain Center is another area where you can get fentanyl testing strips, you can get Narcan. And Tahoe Forest and Gateway both have treatment options available for people who are struggling with substance use. I am available with any questions. You're always welcome to reach out to me at the Speedy Foundation. And then Devin Bradley is my counterpart who is over at Public Health. So you're welcome to reach out to him. Thank you so much and have a wonderful summer.